Reaganomics, essentially, is destroying the quality of life in this country for all Americans. Of course, the minority and the poorer Americans are going to feel the hurt in a much more disproportionate fashion. But there's no question about it that we have going on in America right now what one has to call a bloodless kind of revolution with respect to the role of the federal government. And
are you a rehabilitation person, or are you a punishment person, or are you in between, or is there a division among those two?
Well, an individual, in my opinion, Norman, is sent to prison as punishment and not for punishment.
Okay.
The sentence itself is the punishment that society administers. My philosophy as far as institutions are concerned is that they should be humane places where individuals have the opportunity to take advantage of certain programs that are available, educational and vocational training being two, counseling. And in my opinion, this is not coddling inmates.
There would be some members of the public and some politicians across the street at the legislature who would say prisons should not be country clubs, the people committed rape, robbery, murder, and they should be punished. What do you say to people like that?
I once again say the sentence they receive is punishment, and I challenge any of those individuals or anyone to visit our institutions, and if they can come away with the attitude that these are country clubs, then I don't want to be a member of their country club.
Georgia put together a 20-play drive to open the game on the pinpoint passing of Buck Ballou and the running of Herschel Walker, who with 165 yards today became Georgia's all-time ground gainer for a season. The largest crowd in Georgia history looked on. But the Tiger defense held Herschel out on this play and forced the Dogs to kick an easy field goal. 3-0 Georgia. In the second quarter, Ron O'Neal ran 26 yards to the Georgia 22. And Ken Hobby made a great pitch just before his knee hit the turf, allowing Mike Edwards to score from 7 yards out. 7-3 Auburn. Auburn had the lead and the momentum until this O'Neal fumble at midfield. 2 plays later, Buck Ballou laid it up for tight end Norris Brown, and the Dogs were off and winging. Late in the half, another Ballou aerial to another tight end, Clarence Kay. It was 17-7. Still another Auburn turnover allowed Georgia to drive for this Herschel Walker TD in the third. Auburn put together a late drive to make the final 24-13. Auburn's 3 turnovers, the running of Herschel Walker and the throwing of Buck Ballou. Too much for the Tigers today. Georgia 24, Auburn 13. This is Phil Snow reporting from Athens, Georgia.
Not a lot we can do about this one today. Forget about it. Learn from it. Be a bigger and a better and a stronger man coming back from it. We're very, very lucky to have a great opportunity in the last football game on national television against Alabama. It's got all of everything in the world riding on the football game. It really and truly will be better than any football game that you could go to, because everybody in America will be looking at you. Everybody in America that cares anything about college football will be watching you on the 28th of November. Let's make sure that this loss doesn't take anything away from our preparation, from your concentration, and take anything away from you ending up with a winning season. You can make it all happen on the 28th.
Alabama came out showing Penn State the seldom used pass. The first score of the game coming when Walter Lewis hits Jesse Bendros for a 37-yard touchdown pass. Paul Trod, playing for the injured Peter Kim, booted the point after, and Alabama holds a 7-0 lead. An Alabama turnover sets up Penn State's first score. Ricky Moore loses the handle at the Tide 34. 3 plays netted Penn State a 1st and goal at the 5. But from there, the Tide defense stiffened. 3 plays finds Penn State back at the 18. Brian Franco then comes on to boot a 34-yard field goal. That makes it 7-3 Alabama, 10 minutes left in the half. A Nittany Lion turnover sets up Bama's next score. Robbie Jones recovering the fumble at the 19. On 3rd and goal from the 2, Paul Carruth takes it in. With a point after, it's 14-3 Alabama. A Penn State punt gives Bama the ball at their own 36. Lewis to the air again. This one to Joey Jones, good for 57 yards, all the way down to the Penn State 7. Jeff Fagan then takes it in from the 5, but the touchdown is nullified by a holding penalty. That sets up a Paul Trod field goal. At that point, it's Alabama 17 and Penn State 3. The Bama defense sets up the Tide for another score late in the half. Jeremiah Castile picks off the Todd Blackledge pass at the Tide 42. Using the clock to perfection and moving downfield, Lewis goes to the air again for the tally. This one to Bendros with just 8 seconds left, and Alabama has an incredible 24-3 lead at halftime. The third quarter was scoreless, with the Tide defense playing outstanding. Penn State took the opening kickoff and drove it deep. They had a 1st and goal at the Alabama 1. Then it's deja vu. Think back to the 1979 Sugar Bowl. Meade is stopped short on 1st down. Warner can't make it in on 2nd down. 3rd and goal, Meade up the middle again. He still can't get in. Then on 4th and goal, Warner again is denied. Alabama with a great goal line stand. Penn State finally gets a touchdown in the 4th quarter when John Williams scores on this 41-yard romp. That makes it 24-10 Alabama. Penn State threatened again, 4th and 4 at the Bama 19. But Benny Perrin comes up with a great play to break up the pass, stopping a Lions scoring threat with 8:52 left in the game. Joe Carter caps the Tide scoring with a 1-yard plunge, making it 31-10. Penn State scores again late, making the final 31-16. Alabama upsets Penn State. Coach Bear Bryant's 314th career win, tying him with Amos Alonzo Stagg. He can break the record in 2 weeks against Auburn in Birmingham.
Dr. T, what is your evaluation of the State Board of Education's decision to implement the teacher certification examination in Alabama?
Bob, I'm real pleased with it overall. The number passing is within the range of other states. It's about what I would have predicted. However, we do have some problems in certain areas. Speech pathology being one, some of the special education areas, the counseling area. these have very high failing rates. And it's my opinion that something needs to be adjusted in those areas. But my big concern, as I've said repeatedly, we need a few more testing dates to get more students before we start adjusting anything. And I've asked the state board, and they've approved it, to wait until after the March testing before we begin making any adjustments.
Well, Bob, I think it's a step in the right direction. We have supported the initial testing of teachers. We feel that this is going to give some assurance of quality. I would hasten to say, though, that I have very serious doubts that the public is willing to really pay the price to get the utmost in quality in the teaching profession. If we want to really make teaching quality the emphasis, then what's going to have to happen is that we're going to have to make teaching competitive with other professions economically and otherwise.
What do you think has been the most important outgrowth of the test results so far?
Well, the most important outgrowth has been a lessening of the number of people training to become teachers. The attitude among young people today is, I'm not going into education. It doesn't pay enough for me to make a living. And if I'm going to have to stand for rigid examinations, then I'm simply going into another field.
Like I think any testing, I think it's going to cause improved teacher education programs at the universities and colleges. When a staff member knows that their students must at some time be testing what they learn, you'll see a better effort, a greater effort being placed on those courses. That's not to say that they may not be doing a good job now, but they'll simply be inclined to do a better job, as well as students be inclined to work a little harder.
What is the answer when it comes to dealing with education programs that produce students who have low passage rates on these exams?
Well, I don't think the answer is compensatory education. I think the answer is what educationalists call developmental education. We've known for a long time if we let a child get out of elementary school unable to do grade level reading, it's going to be very, very difficult at junior high or senior high level to bring that child up to grade level, simply because the problems become more complicated as you move up the ladder in terms of getting a youngster to read.
So we're saying basically this is a carryover from the beginning of his education through the college level.
No question of that.
Well, we've already asked all the colleges to report to us what they're doing since the first testing date, and they are making a lot of adjustments. They're making sure now that their faculty as well as the students understand the objectives of this test. Now, I'm not talking about the questions on the test, but they were supposed to have made these available before the test. And the objective is what's important. So they're already doing that all across the state, even the schools where virtually all students are passing. They're acquainting the students with the objectives, and they're making sure that all their programs that we've approved are being taught, and the subject matter being taught.
Ben Davis says he's angry over the decision by Lowndes County Probate Judge Harold Hammond to sell land to Browning Ferris Industries for a hazardous dump site. He says the judge is doing a disservice to the people of Lowndes County.
Our Office of Judge of Probate has a lot left to be desired. And after talking to a lot of the citizens of Lowndes County who has expressed concern for the efficiency in which this office is now operating, I have made a decision that I will be a candidate for the Judge of Probate of Lowndes County in the 1982 election year.
Davis also has another reason for opposing Hammond.
There are some papers in which I filed at the Judge of Probate office, and 2 years later I found that they were not filed properly.
We were unable to contact Judge Hammond for comment. Meanwhile, the 38-year-old Davis, a Hayneville businessman, says he's already begun raising funds and will begin his campaign for the Office of Probate in January. From Lowndes County, Dan Black, WSFA TV News.
It just wasn't good neighborhood management. That's what some neighbors of the yellow and white house said when the Teeks first moved into the area. But the neighbors attending the open house today were of a different mind. Those neighbors we talked to say they're happy the Teeks are there now, and there's been no trouble with the fraternity.
I think it has been excellent, and I will tell you this, the majority of the people in the neighborhood are very pleased. We think it's an acquisition to the neighborhood, and we hope that all of the boys will be very happy and stay right here because we're going to do everything we can to see that you do.
I have understood that there were a few people who objected, but I think that was before they knew we were going to have a nice bunch of boys here.
And the Teak president, Ricky Coulter, says the fraternity has heard no more negative comments from area residents.
I think the people have accepted us as part of their neighborhood, and they know if they have any problems, like if a burglar's going to break in or something or other, there's always a house full of guys over here that just have to let out a yell and come running down. So it's
Coulter says the Teaks plan to keep up their good image in the neighborhood, and he hopes there will never be any cause for complaint. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News.
In 50 years, we haven't seen in 50 years in a situation where a president has set about restructuring and reorganizing the entire federal government in the space of 10 months already. And in the process of doing so is actually upsetting very, very negatively the quality of life for Americans. It is very disturbing, to say the least. And since he is an honest man, I really believe that the American people will be reacting in the near future. It's the amazing thing about Americans when they feel the persistent pinch in their pocketbooks, when the interest rates do not go down, when they're not able to purchase homes because of the mortgage rates, when they're not able to educate 3 or 4 young persons in their family that heretofore they didn't have any tremendous difficulties, when their front doorsteps are tapped, then they are going to react. In what fashion they're going to react, I do not know, but they will not be quiescent. There will be some kind of pattern of social behavior that will tell the president and his cabinet that Americans are not pleased with what their government is doing to them.
People are suggesting that by then it may just be too late.
There's always a possibility that it might be too late, but it's also very important that they begin to move now. That is why they've got to put together coalitions in this country, coalitions bent on getting to the president and his cabinet the fact that the most important human resources in this country are this nation's families, and it is important to conserve and preserve these resources in the greatest democracy on the face of the earth. And I think the American people have to begin now to get that message, crossing color lines, ideological lines, political, just crossing every line. The American people have a real challenge before them.
The second language in Nigeria is English, which gives us an entree to speak there. And frankly, we've made some great for him to preach to my people. So it's a good... The main reason being when we funnel world relief or hunger money or money to help the undeveloped areas of the world, we already have the staff there to administer. We don't have any overhead cost in the administration of those funds. It's not that we aren't interested in them, it's just that maybe they haven't invited us in. That's the key to it.
Now with this new partnership with the Nigerians, is this a first as far as the Alabama-Nigerian partnership or what?
There have been other partnerships established by other states. Texas is involved with Brazil, for example. But this is a new thing, and we are in on the frontier of it.
A decade of golf so kids can play games. That's the theme for the 1982 George Lindsay benefit to be held in Montgomery, April 23rd through the 25th. 10 years of Lindsay Golf benefits for Alabama's physical and mentally handicapped have donated over $500,000 to the Alabama Special Olympics. Lindsay's annual press conference was held this morning at the Arrowhead Country Club, the site again of this year's event. Throughout the 10 years, there have been many to contribute, and this year will be no exception. Already lined up for the Great Stars Show the night of April the 24th are the Nashville Edition, Charlie Pride, the Roy Clark Las Vegas Review, and the Mel Tillis Band. Some of the stars verbally committed to play golf include Ben Johnson, George Kennedy, Slim Pickens, Joe Namath, and Bum Phillips, to name a few. Also planned in conjunction with the golf tournament will be a ladies' tennis tournament. Lindsay says he keeps returning to Montgomery because his benefit is so special.
It's a community and a town and a state and everybody. It's just a big group effort. It's not me, or it's not, I don't think it's any one individual. I just think it's the cooperation of everybody here.
Looks like another outstanding show lined up.
Yeah, I'm awful pleased with these giant stars. I'm talking about guys, you know, who are the major Las Vegas and television motion picture stars will come here and work for nothing for our children.
Again, the date for this year's George Lindsay Celebrity Golf Tournament, April 23rd through the 25th. Rick Pons, WSFA TV Sports. The fire from the tanker car filled with alcohol burned for several hours. Montgomery Fire Chief Jim Sutherland says his men were confronted with a 30,000-gallon bomb when they arrived on the scene. L&N spokesman J.P. Pritchard, who's investigating the derailment, says the tanker car was punctured by the drawbar from a car in front of it. Chief Sutherland says the friction from the metal ignited the highly volatile alcohol. Pritchard says he's almost certain a car loaded with lumber was the first to leave the track. A chain reaction ensued, and 4 more cars, including the tanker car, were pulled off the track. It was then the tanker car was punctured. An inspection of the tracks and the cars involved show they were all in good shape and shouldn't have caused the derailment. Pritchard says he's looking into one theory, that the lumber car wasn't loaded properly, and the lumber shifted on the car, causing it to leave the track. Pritchard warned it's only a theory now, and he won't have the answer on what caused the derailment until he has all the evidence. Chief Sutherland says he was very proud of his men and the way they handled the fire. No one was injured, and property damage was kept to a minimum. Don Phelps, WSFA TV News.
Covering the political beat involves learning and taking part in a time-honored traditional game of trying to predict the outcome of government and political activities, which at this time of year includes next year's governor's race. That phase of the guessing game takes on an air of futility at this time because very few of the candidates will formally announce this early on. But what makes the guessing game all the better is when several of these possible or probable candidates show up somewhere together.
Today at the George Lindsay Celebrity Golf Tournament News Conference, there was added incentive to join the game. Seated at the head table with Lindsay were Montgomery Mayor Emery Farmer, strongly considered a candidate for the Republican ticket, former Governor George Wallace, whose recently stepped up to parent schedule makes him appear interested in his old job again, and Governor Fob James, the political rookie governor who appears pleased with his current term, but not talking about a possible second campaign. The 3 gentlemen would have been at this function regardless of their position in next year's race, but because of that overtone, the college football bowl game guessers and golf fanatics shifted into the political guessing game, and it was a great opportunity for political observers to watch how the 3 men acted toward one another, which of course led to how that action or non-action might be interpreted. So that each of you may join in the game, here were some of the key events. Emery Farmer sat next to Governor George Wallace, occasionally chatting. Governor James sat at the other end of the head table. Each spoke briefly, saying nothing that could be construed as heavy politics, and no one declared candidacy. But when leaving, Democrat James briefly bid farewell to Democrat Wallace, but then took an extra minute with Republican Farmer, which caught Democrat Wallace's eye. The only firm conclusion is that James had something to say to Farmer that he didn't have to say to Wallace, and all that did was start yet another guessing game. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.
It's with sentences like this that we can tell thieves and give them a very clear message to stay out of Alabama and don't bring your deal here. And at the same time, our citizens out there see that when this guy comes in and rips off $2 million, he goes down hard too, just like the guy who rips off a $100 raincoat.
Krebs says the task force will investigate all types of white-collar crime, everything from public officials misusing their office to drug trafficking. He says the task force will use existing resources in the state, like the Office of Public Safety and various experts, to aid the investigations. He says by using these resources, local law officials will have more information to use in obtaining convictions. Krebs is concerned with what some have called inequitable sentences for white-collar convictions. He says his task force will address that problem.
The way we do that is educating the public to the fact that there is inequality in sentencing. And 2, try to make sure that the judges that give the sentences have all the information available about the person that they're to sentence. That's done typically, but in addition, you've got to make sure the judge knows the harm that's been caused by this person, whether it be economic or an indirect harm or direct and immediate harm.
Krebs says more white-collar convictions will restore the public's confidence in government. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
The trial of 31-year-old William Bush began late this morning around 11:15. Most of the morning was used to strike the 12-man, 3-alternate jury made up of 11 whites and 4 blacks. Bush, who sat expressionless in Judge Joseph Phelps' courtroom, is accused in the July 26 shooting deaths of 22-year-old Larry Dominguez, a Magic Mart clerk on McGee Road, and 25-year-old Andy Adams, an employee at 711 on Narrow Lane Road. The 2 men were shot execution style with a .38 caliber pistol. A 3rd man was critically wounded in the Magic Mart holdup but survived. Montgomery County District Attorney Jimmy Evans, who's leading the prosecution, presented 13 witnesses, 2 of which were experts. Among the witnesses, 26-year-old Tony Holmes, who was shot in the neck but survived and has now recovered. Holmes appeared nervous as he gave his testimony concerning the incidents on the night of the shooting. Another key witness for the prosecution was Patricia Pringle, the wife of Edward Pringle, the 2nd defendant in the convenience store murders. She testified that Bush told her that he had shot the 2 convenience store clerks and that her husband, Edward Pringle, had not pulled the trigger. Evidence presented in the case consists of 53 exhibits, including dozens of photographs of the crime scene and the victims. Also submitted by the prosecution was a .38 caliber pistol, the alleged murder weapon, and a 30-page signed confession by Bush, admitting he had committed the crimes of which he has been charged. Earlier, the defense had objected to the confession on the grounds that it had allegedly been beaten out of Pringle by police. However, following testimony by investigators concerning Bush's questioning, Judge Phelps allowed the confession to be submitted as evidence. At 4:30, Judge Phelps called a recess. Court resumes this evening at 6:30. From the Montgomery County Courthouse, Dan Black, WSFA TV News.
Well, Rick, I think without a doubt we're going to be a different looking team. I think we're going to be able to see that AUM can have a bigger team on the court this year than we've had in the past. All in all, we've got 8 returning players and 5 new ones, and I think the new ones have really blended in well with the older players. Their maturity and leadership has really been something that you can't buy, and you need awfully bad, and particularly a team sport like this. But I think we're going to be able to rebound the ball better. I certainly believe we will, and I think offensively, as far as outshooters, we're going to be better. So we feel like that there are a lot of things that I've alluded to some already that'll help us to be a good basketball team, we think.
You open tonight against Stillman. What do you expect from the Tigers?
Well, I expect them to be fast and shoot it quick and not to be an extremely patient team, which is kind of not a trademark of theirs, patience. But whenever a team plays like they do and play as hard as they do, anything can happen. So we've got to be ready to play, and we've got to be ready to play hard and quick and with authority. And of course, it's our first game, and I think our players will be eager for that.
Governor Fob James established the task force to assist local police with white-collar crimes in their areas. The head of the new task force, Tom Krebs, is a state securities commissioner who's instrumental in the establishment of the nationally known Leviticus project's crackdown on coal fraud. Krebs says in some ways the task force is based on the Leviticus project.
Well, the Leviticus project it's shown us the way. The Leviticus project itself is a combination of the Department of Public Safety, the Alabama Securities Commission, the Birmingham Police Department. It was from that idea and the very great successes that we have with the Leviticus project that this whole concept of a task force of taking resources available to Montgomery, in Montgomery, and making them available to people in the field in DeKalb County and Lauderdale County. It's from that we saw that it could be done. We attempted to try to do that.
Krebs says the task force will also recommend stiffer penalties for crimes. He says Alabama needs anti-bid rigging and wiretapping laws, and the Ethics Commission should be given the authority to investigate ethics violations. He says because of the increasing unemployment rate, lawlessness and increased violence will be on the rise, but says the task force hopes to use all the state's resources to get convictions. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
When they do that, you got an increase in violence and lawlessness.
The prosecution, led by Montgomery County District Attorney Jimmy Evans today, presented 13 witnesses in the state's case against 31-year-old William Bush. Bush is accused of murdering 22-year-old Larry Dominguez, who was employed at the McGee Road Magic Mart, and he's also charged in the death of 25-year-old Andy Adams, a clerk at the 711 on Narrow Lane Road. Among the witnesses to testify were 26-year-old Tony Holmes, who was critically wounded during the Magic Mart holdup but has now recovered. Holmes appeared nervous as he recounted the shooting on the night of July 26. Another key witness for the prosecution was the wife of Edward Pringle, the co-defendant of the convenience store murders. She testified that Bush told her her husband had not pulled the trigger, but that he himself had shot the convenience store clerks. Evidence presented in the case include the alleged murder weapon, a .38 caliber revolver, and a 30-page signed confession by Bush admitting his part in the holdups. However, in his original confession, he told police Edward Pringle had shot the clerk at the Magic Mart and that he had shot the 7-Eleven employee on Narrow Lane Road himself. This evening, following a 2-hour recess, Police Detective R.T. Ward read to the court Bush's first and second statements. However, in his second signed confession, he told police he alone had shot Larry Dominguez, Andy Adams, and Dominguez's friend Tony Holmes, and that Edward Pringle, the co-defendant, had not shot any of the victims, as he had stated in his first confession. Asked why he shot the store clerks, Bush said he was high and messed up on drugs. He said he didn't mean to kill the men, only to keep them from getting to the telephone. In his second written confession, he said, quote, "I'm sorry it happened. I've got to pay for what I've done." The trial continues 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. From the Montgomery County Courthouse, Dan Black, WSFA TV News.
The Senators of AUM jumped out to a big early lead and never looked back in notching their first win of the season. Stillman was never really in the game. In the first half, AUM led by as much as 20 at the 10-minute mark. In the second half, the Tigers cut AUM's lead to 9, but the Senators worked back out to a 20-point lead and played substitutes the remainder of the game to claim a 105-95 win. Freshman Jesse Phillips paced the Senators with 34 points in his first college game. Junior Barry Fincher added 17. Stillman was led by the 31 points of Richard Winter. Leonard Jones added 27 for the Tigers. AUM at 1-0 will play next on the road Saturday night at LaGrange College, Georgia. Stillman, with their loss, falls to 1-2. Reporting from AUM, Rick Pons, WSFA TV Sports.
The attorney representing Family Mart at the meeting was Robert Black. He and store director Charles Knoll told the council of plans to open a package store in the Family Mart building. They say the package store will have a separate entrance from the rest of the store and will close at least by midnight. But Starr, whose district the Family Mart is located in, says because the Family Mart sells groceries, the council should think twice about allowing a package store in the same building. Starr says if we allow this to happen, every grocery and convenience store in town will want one. But the Family Mart representatives say other Family Marts in the South operate package stores in similar situations, and there's never been any trouble. They say the absence of any adjacent residences also makes the place suitable for a package store. And Councilman Mark Gilmore, who's recently been waging a war against some area lounges he calls joints, offered arguments in favor of the Family Mart proposal. Gilmore says, why delay this one when we've got package stores all up and down the boulevard? The council has delayed action on the request until December the 8th. Councilman Starr asked for the delay, saying he didn't want the council to make a hasty decision, which it might regret later. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News.
When they get their samples, we'll be in raising.
IBEW electrical linemen currently handle live power lines up to 5,000 kilovolts with rubber gloves, but the power company's proposed new plan calls for linemen to handle energized power lines up to 15,000 kilovolts with the aid of tools, equipment, and rubber gloves. Power company spokesman Bryant Allen says the company is the only Southern utility member that doesn't work power lines above 5,000 volts. He says the move is necessary to improve service, reduce the frequency of power outages to its customers, and says the new procedure is safe.
We are very conscious and emphasize safety, as we always have done, and we feel that with the new equipment and with rubber gloves, and that there's no concession to safety procedures by doing this.
The safety feature is the main concern of union members who, when contacted at union headquarters in Birmingham, did not want to comment on the possible strike. Another concern among union members is the expense involved with the training program and the new equipment necessary to undertake handling of the higher voltage power lines. Union members managed to get a temporary restraining order, but the power company is trying to get that injunction lifted. Kim Davis, WSFA TV News.
Governor James says politicians have gotten away from the Founding Fathers' ideals on which this country was based. He says the two most important are government's defense of the country's borders and providing the people with a stable currency. Governor James says the president's plan to trim the budget will come under attack from every direction, since people like Tip O'Neill, Teddy Kennedy, and George McGovern will probably, quote, never understand what it means to destroy the medium of exchange.
You cannot create debt to make happy every political pressure from one group to the other, from the corporate suites of America down to the social needs of this country, and finance it out of deficit spending where you print dollars faster than the production lines of America produce goods and services.
Governor James says the president's change of direction won't be easy, nor will it come overnight. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
According to the Journal of American Insurance, small cars made up only 38% of the cars on the road in 1979, but small car occupants accounted for a disproportionate 55% of the deaths in two-vehicle crashes. Large cars, on the other hand, made up 62% of the fleet, but accounted for only 45% of the occupants killed in two-vehicle crashes. In fact, if you're riding in a subcompact car that collides with a large car, your chances of being killed are 8 times greater than those for occupants of the large car.
A full-size car has a large crush distance, but it's simply not available in a small car. The occupants have not nearly as much protection.
So you'd say the likelihood of having a serious wreck in a small car is much greater than if you were in a larger car.
Yes, that's quite true there.
The Highway Loss Data Institute reports subcompacts continue to show the highest collision losses. So if you're planning to buy a small car, remember to wear your seatbelt and use other safety features as well. And be aware that a wreck in a small car will almost always be more serious. Gina Gregory, WSFA TV News. In its review of the first 9 months of experience, the Highway Loss Data Institute said of the 10 cars with the worst collision loss experience, 9 are subcompacts, 7 of them are imports, 2 from Datsun, 2 from Toyota, and 1 each from Audi, Mazda, and Volkswagen. American-made compacts dominated the 10 best list of models with the lowest collision coverage losses. 9 of the 10 models with the best experience were built by General Motors, with Ford's Mercury Marquis completing the list. 7 are compacts, 2 intermediates, and 1 a subcompact. Of the models with the high volume sales, the Toyota Celica, Chevrolet Camaro, Datsun 310, Toyota Corolla, and Ford Mustang experienced the highest average loss payments per insured vehicle year. In a David and Goliath crash between a small and large car, the small car always winds up bearing the brunt of the crash. The small car will be driven backwards, subjecting its occupants to much greater crash forces than occupants of the larger vehicle. Also, supports and barriers which were built to break away when struck head-on by a standard-sized car may not break when hit by a smaller one. Signposts and light poles constructed to present little or no hazards to a 4,000-pound car can seriously damage a 2,000-pound car and injure its occupants. We're not telling you not to buy a small car, just warning you about the safety differences and urging you to make a wise choice when shopping for a car. Gina Gregory, WSFA TV News.
During opening arguments, Deputy District Attorney Ellen Brooks told the jury that Young allegedly deceived a Montgomery woman, Lula Mae Simmons, out of a divorce settlement check of $31,000. The prosecution alleged that Young put Mrs. Simmons' money into his own personal account and used the bulk of the money for himself. Ms. Brooks said she expected the evidence to show that Young was in financial trouble before Mrs. Simmons received the check. Defense attorney Dolores Boyd told the jury that her client was innocent. Ms. Boyd says it was Mrs. Simmons' idea to have Young handle her money, and there was no deception involved. Boyd alleges that Simmons and Young were sweethearts, and when the relationship fell apart, that's what brought Young to the courtroom. For much of the afternoon, the prosecution huddled together with the defense over legal matters. Then in the end, Judge Thomas declared a mistrial when he felt an inadvertent display of evidence by the state may have prejudiced the jury in the case. A new trial date has not been set. Don Phelps, WSFA TV News.
Alabama basketball fans have a reason for looking forward to the coming season. After all, Coach Wimp Sanderson returns 4 starters and 5 lettermen from a club that finished 18-12 last season, and his recruiting year was ranked among the best in the nation. Since practice started back on October 15th, Sanderson has been looking for the proper blend between his veterans and incoming freshmen. And so far, he says he likes what he sees.
I think we've had good preseason drills. Our players have worked hard, had a good attitude, and I think we've learned a lot. And we're trying to just combine the talents of the new players with the talents of our veterans, and I've been pleased thus far.
What do you feel will be the strengths and weaknesses of this year's team?
I think the strengths of our basketball team will be our rebounding, hopefully our defense. We're going to have a good team. I think we'll be a good running team from an offensive standpoint. We should have pretty good depth on this basketball team. We've had a little bit of trouble with turnovers here in the early stages of practice, and of course you can always improve on your shooting, but I've been pleased with them, and I think rebounding and defense and the running game ought to be our strengths.
One of the keys to the Crimson Tide's play this season will undoubtedly be senior Eddie Phillips. The 6'7" forward was the Southeastern Conference leader in rebounding last year and Bama's leading scorer. He says he's expecting another big year.
Well, I just hope I can improve my individual skills from the past years, and hopefully if I can contribute improving my skills, maybe the team will improve overall. And so if I can do that, hopefully it'll make a better team.
Most of the talk for great things at Alabama revolves around the talents of the incoming freshman class. And tonight at 10, we'll examine their early progress. Alabama fans are looking for great things from their basketball team this year. Preseason polls are predicting a strong showing not only in the Southeastern Conference but also in the nation. And most of the excitement centers around 2 players that haven't played a minute of college round ball. Bobby Lee Hurd, a 6'9" center from Huntsville, and Enos Watley, a 6'3" guard from Birmingham, were 2 of the top freshman prizes in the country last year. But Alabama coach Wimp Sanderson is quick to remind Tide fans not to expect too much too soon from his young players. He says in time, Hurt, Watley, and Bama's other 2 freshmen, Mark Farmer and Rex Jones, will contribute.
All 4 of our players have done a very good job, and I think they've learned a lot, and I've been encouraged by their play.
Expect to see any of them starting?
Well, I'm really not looking at it from a starting standpoint right now. We're going to look at several different combinations, and I don't know exactly what we're going to do, but we'll play a lot of people, try to early, and just see if we can get something established.
The anticipation and enthusiasm of having a good team is evident among the Alabama players. Both old and new are expecting good things.
Yeah, we are coming together every day. We practice, and as the weeks wind down, we're getting closer together and getting to where we need to be be competitive this year.
I think this is the best team that I've seen down here talent-wise since I've been here. And I know if we put everything together that we can be a championship team.
A lot of people picking Alabama high, not only in the SEC, but also in the country. Do you feel they can live up to the billing? Are you going to be that good a basketball team?
Yeah, I think we can be. I believe we will, you know. Just got to work hard and just play to win.
Alabama opens their basketball season Friday, November the 27th at home against New Hampshire. The first SEC game is Saturday, December the 12th in Tuscaloosa against Vanderbilt. Reporting from Tuscaloosa, Rick Pons, WSFA TV Sports.
Apparently, we had two players that lost their lives in a car accident. I think they left campus this morning about 4 o'clock, I guess, to just drive down to Panama City to the beach, spend a couple of hours, and drive back here this afternoon. And they hit a oil truck, I think, head on around Mariana, Florida. And I would imagine that they went to sleep in the car. And of course, it's a tragic thing for their families and our football team, and they're both fine people, fine young men. Credit to their families, their communities, and we'll certainly miss them in our program here at Auburn.
Having already approved the House package of investment bills proposed by the governor and not having any of the Senate versions of that same package before them, the House worked a short day today. Meanwhile, the House Ways and Means Committee and the Senate Finance and Taxation Committee took another step in a procedure where the two chambers swapped bills for the other's approval. The House Committee approved 5 of the Senate's bills that are a part of the package, and the Senate Committee approved 5 of the House package of bills. All of those bills are basically non-controversial parts of the governor's package. The controversial bill that would spend the money is locked up in the Senate. The Senate is working on the House version of that bill while sitting on its own version. Progress on getting debate on the bill out of the way was slowed with a 2-hour filibuster by Senator Larry Keener, who lost an effort to include credit unions as depositories for the oil package money. Legislators are saying the final disposition of the spending bill will likely happen in a conference committee since the Senate is working on the House bill and because of reported disagreements between the House and Senate over what should be included in that bill. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
Mr. DeGrasse Reed, Mr. Denton, Mr. Figures, Mr. Clark. Yeah. Mr. Bailey. Aye.
Says who?
Farron.
Says who?
Mr. Brittenell.
Who said?
Mr. Callahan.
The jury deliberated for an hour and a half before returning its guilty verdict. William Bush sat quietly, staring straight ahead as Judge Joseph Phelps read the jury's decision. Following the reading of the verdict, Judge Phelps instructed the jury that under the new state code, a sentencing hearing must be held immediately. After the hearing, the jurors again filed out of the courtroom to decide whether or not Bush should be sentenced to die in the electric chair or receive life without parole. An hour and 20 minutes later, the jury returned with a unanimous death sentence decision. During final defense testimony, William Bush took the witness stand to deny 2 signed confessions taken by police when he was arrested August 28th. Bush said police forced him to make the confessions. He said officers beat him and held a gun between his eyes during questioning. Arresting officer R.T. Ward, who took the stand, said Bush's accusations were totally untrue. This afternoon, after the death penalty was handed down, Bush was rushed from the courtroom by deputies. His elderly mother showed little emotion following the proceedings.
I figured he did what they had to do.
You think your son is guilty?
I don't know that either. Don't nobody know that but him and the good Lord.
Outside the courthouse, the mother of 26-year-old Tony Holmes, the man wounded during the McGee Road Magic Mart holdup, appeared emotional. I think Mr. Bush received the sentence he deserved?
I don't really know. You remember we've been hurt real bad. My son suffered death, which made me hurt.
Later, District Attorney Jimmy Evans commented on the outcome of the trial.
I think the jury echoed the feelings of what this community believes is that people like that shouldn't be left alive to kill again.
Bush's attorney, George Cameron, says he intends to file an immediate appeal on behalf of his client.
Judge Joseph Phelps has set a November 25th sentencing hearing for William Bush. At that time, Judge Phelps himself will make the final decision as to whether or not William Bush will die in the electric chair. From the Montgomery County Courthouse, Dan Black, WSFA TV News.
Montgomery School Superintendent Henry Adair says the elementary schools in Montgomery County don't have recess because there isn't time for it during the school day. He says because of accreditation guidelines, the school system is required to use 6 hours of the 6.5-hour school day in classroom instruction. He says the other 30 minutes are used for lunch and housekeeping. If recess is added, he says the school day must be extended. The teachers and other personnel would work an extra 15 minutes each day, and the children would be later getting home. Adair says it will also cost more money and could cause some employee morale problems. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
The verdict came after an hour and a half of deliberation. Immediately following the announcement of the guilty verdict, the jury was instructed to decide whether Bush should die in the Alabama electric chair or receive life without parole. That decision came after another hour and a half of closed-door deliberation, and it was unanimous. All 12 jurors voted for the death penalty. After Judge Joseph Phelps read the sentence, Bush was rushed from the crowded courtroom by deputies. After the proceedings, his mother spoke with the reporters.
I figured he did what they had to do.
You think your son is guilty?
I don't know that either. Don't nobody know that but him and the good Lord.
Following the trial, Montgomery County District Attorney Jimmy Evans told reporters that justice was done.
I think it's a tragedy for the whole community that this whole episode took place. But I think the jury echoed the feelings of what this community believes is that people like that shouldn't be left alive to kill again.
Bush's attorney, George Cameron, says he plans an immediate appeal of the case. From the Montgomery County Courthouse, Dan Black, WSFA TV News.
They considered the evidence.
These second graders from Chisholm School had a somewhat unconventional school day when their entire reading class was moved to Montgomery Mall this afternoon. Their teacher, Ginger Johnson, says the classroom in the mall is an effort to make the public aware of what's going on in the classroom.
Unless they're a parent and they come and visit in the school, then I don't think they actually know what the classroom is like because it's changed from probably when they were in the classroom. We do a lot of things differently now, but we're still trying to teach the basics.
The second graders didn't seem to mind the shoppers who stopped to watch. Ms. Johnson says she was concerned that the children wouldn't be able to concentrate on their studies, but she says the spectators seemed to have little effect. During the afternoon, the biggest drawing card for the class proved to be their presentation of Thanksgiving songs. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
April the 6th. Go ahead, we're going to tell turkey jokes for the last half hour. The question is my latest. Chop Clyde's neck off. We go off of this as this is a ransom. Really what it's amounts to.
Since the House of Representatives had moved its package of bills through quicker than the Senate has been working with the House versions for final passage. Last night, the Senate passed 4 of the 9 bills, and today passed the remaining 5. Senate sponsor of the governor's package, John Teague, preserved most of the bills from any change, including a series of amendments offered by Montgomery's Bishop Barron. One of Barron's proposals would have substituted the governor's package to enter into a $650 million construction program with a plan that would have invested the $449 million oil revenues and used the interest income to retire the 1984-cent gas tax. Of the 9 bills passed by the Senate, 5 were approved with no changes. They will go to the governor for his signature. Of the other 4 bills that were returned to the House with Senate changes, the House has already agreed to 3 of the changes and is expected to agree to the 4th bill tomorrow morning. A 10th bill tied to the governor's 9-bill package setting up a distribution formula for the proposed $200 million housing program was also given final passage. Representative Rick Manley warned the House that the legislature would be blamed for any possible problems found later in the package of bills. That led to House Speaker Joe McCorkadale saying he wouldn't sign any of the bills until the governor's legal and bond attorneys assure the legislature that all of the bills are in their proper form. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
With a particular candidate, I believe that my church has cut down considerably on the number of teenage traffic deaths and this type of thing. So I'd be in favor of that. I think other than what I've answered to Greg, this is where my improvement in ethical conditions, but also that our churches might fulfill the commission by the administration, Dr. Bagley and others, all funds that are received, missions money or cooperative program receipts that are in transit, actually. It's what's done. Mr. Jim Glaze, I'm a little hesitant for us to make biblical teaching a political football within our school system. I would be very pleased if both issues, both positions were taught honestly. It's very difficult for teachers to teach one or the other and treat them equally.